Montana Territory, July 1878. The night sky cracked open with thunder when Helena Langley ran for her life. Her boots struck the soaked earth with force, skirt hem dragging mud, breath ragged as she pushed through the black pines. She did not look back at the house behind her, the one where she had been locked inside for 2 days, where her mother's voice had pleaded from the other side of the door. Where her fiancé, no, her captor had taken hold of her arm so hard it left bruises. She only looked forward now, toward freedom. Toward anything but him. He had a name, Sterling Pike, but that name would never touch her lips again. Her chest burned with each step, lungs screaming for air. She had taken her father's horse. A good mare, fast and sure-footed, but even the best horse could not keep going forever. The saddle was slick with rain, her dress soaked through, and by the time she reached the edge of the high ridge, the horse stumbled beneath her. They both fell. She hit the ground hard, shoulder first. A cry caught in her throat. The mare whinnied but stood up, unharmed. Helena did not. Blood warmed her temple. Her vision spun. She forced herself upright, one hand gripping the saddle horn. She would walk if she had to. "Hey, hey, hold on," the voice came from the tree line. A man's voice. Low. Rough-edged but not cruel. She staggered back, heart hammering. "I ain't gonna hurt you," the man said, stepping into the moonlight. He wore a wide-brimmed hat, soaked through. His coat hung open, revealing a lean frame, a holstered Colt, and mud up to his knees. His face was shadowed, but his eyes were sharp, steady. He looked like he had been riding a long time and not for pleasure. "Stay back," Helena warned, trying to lift her arm. It shook too hard to be of use. "I will," he said calmly, hands raised. "But you are bleeding, you need help." She blinked. His voice sounded honest. Not soft, but not lying either. Her knees buckled before she could decide. He caught her before she hit the ground. When she woke, it was dry, warm. A fire crackled nearby. She lay beneath a thick wool blanket inside a small cabin built of pine and stone. Her cut had been cleaned and bandaged. And he was there sitting in a chair by the fire, turning over a tin cup in his hands. "You are awake," he said, rising. "Good. Where am I?" "About 8 miles west of Red Elk Creek. My name is Rhett Garner." His voice was low, but his words were clear. No drawl, no slyness. Just plain and real. She sat up fast. "My horse, she is outside, eating. She made it." Helena stared at him. He did not look away. His eyes were the color of river stone, cool, steady. His jaw was covered in 5 days' worth of stubble, and a thin scar curved near his left cheekbone. He looked like he had seen hard times and did not run from them. "I did not mean to drag you into anything," she said after a long silence. "I just needed to get away." "You dragged nothing," Rhett said. "I saw you fall. I could not leave you there." She nodded, chest tight with emotion. "Thank you." Rhett looked at her again, slower this time. "You were running." "Yes, from him." "Yes." He nodded once. "You are safe now," she believed him. She did not know why, but she did. The next morning, the storm passed, leaving a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Rhett's cabin was tucked against a hill with a stream nearby and a corral out back holding 2 horses. Helena stepped outside, arms crossed against the chill. Rhett stood by the corral, brushing down her mare. "You could have left me," she said, approaching. "I do not leave people. You do not even know me." "I know enough." She looked at him. "You do not ask many questions. I reckon you will tell me when you are ready." Helena looked away. "I was supposed to marry a man named Sterling Pike. My father arranged it. Pike owns land, cattle, and too many guns. He is not right in the head." Rhett's jaw twitched. "He hurt you," she nodded once. Rhett looked down at the brush in his hands. "And your folks?" "My mother begged him to wait. My father told her to be quiet." He said nothing for a long while. "Then you can stay here as long as you need." "I do not want to bring trouble on you." He looked at her. "I do not scare easy." Helena felt something shift in her chest. The days passed quiet but full. Rhett showed her how to gather water from the stream, how to stack wood for the stove, how to tell a coyote track from a wolf. He moved without hurry, spoke only when he had something to say. And every time she looked at him, she felt a little less afraid. One night she brought him dinner venison stew, a little too salty. He smiled small, real. "You trying to poison me?" she laughed. "Maybe just soften you up." He looked at her, then really looked. "You already have." Helena set down her bowl. She had not planned to feel anything for anyone ever again. She had not planned on Rhett. He stood, walked over slow. "I should not say that. You have been through enough." "You are the only man who has not lied to me," she whispered. "You are the only one who waited." He looked down at her, eyes full of something she had not seen in a long time: care. Real care. "I ain't perfect, Helena, but I would never raise a hand to you. Not ever." Her breath caught. "You do not have to be perfect. Just honest." He reached out, gently touched her wrist. "Then let me be that. Let me look out for you." She looked up at him. "I want that." He leaned in, close enough to feel his breath. "So do I." Their lips met, soft and slow, no rush, just warmth and steady promise. When she pulled back, her cheeks were wet. He wiped her tears with his thumb. "You are safe now," he said again. And for the first time in her life she believed it. By early August, the cottonwoods along the creek had turned a deeper green, heavy with the heat. The days stretched long, filled with quiet labor and the sort of stillness that settled into the bones. Helena spent most mornings tending the vegetable patch behind the cabin. Squash vines had begun to crawl low across the soil, and she'd taken to tying up the bean stalks with strips torn from an old feed sack. Rhett was gone most days before sunup. Riding the ridge line in search of strays from a small herd, he helped watch for an older rancher who lived south of the stream. He came back dust-covered, sometimes with a fresh rabbit or a bundle of fence wire, always with his hat pulled down low over his brow. He didn't speak much about what he saw out there, and she didn't press. But she noticed the way he always checked the horizon before turning in for the night. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines, Helena stood barefoot in the doorway, a fresh bar of soap in her hands. She'd made it herself: lard, lye, and pine oil, following a recipe she'd memorized from her mother's kitchen back home. It had taken days to cure, but the familiar scent steadied her more than she expected. Rhett came up the path just then, leading his horse by the reins. His shirt was damp at the collar, and a thin cut traced the side of his forearm, just above the wrist. "You're bleeding," she said, stepping forward, the soap forgotten in her hand. "Barbed wire caught me clearing a break in the north fence," he answered, tying off the reins. "It's nothing. Let me clean it." He hesitated, then nodded. Inside, he sat at the table while she fetched a basin of warm water and a strip of boiled muslin. She worked in silence, wiping the dirt away, careful not to press too hard. "You ever think about going back?" he asked quietly, her hands stilled. "To that house?" "No, I mean, before all that." "Your life before." She resumed, cleaning the wound, slower now. "I used to teach letters to children at the mission school in town. That was before my father decided I'd be better used elsewhere." Rhett studied her face. "You liked it." "I did. They were good kids. Some couldn't read a word when they came in, but by spring they'd be sounding out the scriptures like they'd written them themselves." He smiled faintly. "You've got a teacher's way." She tied the cloth gently around his wrist. "I had to be patient. Some of them came from nothing. You can't teach someone who's never held a book with the same tone as someone raised with shelves full of them." He flexed his fingers, testing the wrap. "You ever think about doing it again?" "I wouldn't know where to start." Rhett stood, rolling his sleeve back down. "There's a little chapel west of here, near the canyon rim. Old Deacon comes through twice a month, tries to teach the local kids letters and scripture, but he's near blind and can't hold chalk steady. They do better with someone who knows what they're doing. Helena looked up at him. You think they'd have me? I think if you walked in and started talking, they'd listen. Outside, the cicadas had begun their dusk song. She stood, brushing her hands on her skirt. I'd need a slate and a proper primer. I'll ride into Townsend in a few days. I can look. She touched his arm lightly just once, then let go. Thank you. He looked at her for a long moment. Helena, I want something for you, not just safety. A place to live ain't the same as a life. She met his gaze. You think it's possible after everything? I do. If you want it. The next morning he left before first light, not just with a shopping list but with a purpose in his saddlebag. Helena watched him ride out, the outline of him shrinking against the rising sun. She turned back toward the cabin, slate-gray smoke curling from the chimney, and felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Hope, maybe, or something close enough to it. By the time Rhett returned from Townsend, the meadow grass had yellowed at the tips, and the creek ran lower, softened by the August heat. Dust clung to his sleeves, and his horse moved slower than usual, but his eyes held something different, quiet satisfaction, like a man who had done what he set out to do. Helena stood at the edge of the garden, palms stained green from pulling weeds. She straightened as he approached, brushing her hands against her apron. He stepped down from the saddle and unfastened the saddlebag. I found what you asked for, he said, lifting out a wrapped bundle and setting it on the porch rail. Inside the oilcloth were 3 items, a slate board, 2 sticks of chalk, and a worn copy of McGuffey's Second Eclectic Reader. She ran her fingers over the cover as if it might vanish. I asked around some, he added. The deacon said he'd be glad for the help. Said he wouldn't mind giving you his hour on Sundays if you're willing. Helena looked up. You spoke to him yourself. He was standing outside the chapel, trying to patch a hole in the roof with a pie tin. I figured I'd lend a hand and mention you. She pressed her palm lightly against the book's spine. You didn't have to go that far. I wanted to. Her throat tightened. She turned her face toward the trees. I don't know how to thank you. You don't owe me anything. Rhett leaned against the rail. But I'd like to walk you there when you go. That's all. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. That Sunday they left at dawn, riding side by side along the bluff trail. Rhett carried a small canvas bag with bread and dried apples, and Helena had the slate tucked under her arm. The chapel came into view just past a bend in the ridge, a single-room structure with whitewashed walls, and a bell that hung lopsided in its frame. A few children waited outside, half of them barefoot, the rest in clothes that had seen better years. When Helena stepped down from the saddle, a girl with 2 braids approached, eyes wide. Are you the new teacher? I suppose I am, Helena said, adjusting the strap of her satchel. What's your name, Letty? My brother's name's Illy. We come from the place with the orchard. Helena smiled at her. Well then, Letty, let's see what you remember from last year. Inside, the pews had been pushed back and a small table stood near the front, chalkboard balanced on top. Rhett lingered near the doorway, arms crossed, watching as Helena gathered the children and began the lesson. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. The children quieted on their own, drawn to the calm certainty in her tone. By mid-morning, he stepped outside, giving her space. He sat beneath a juniper tree and waited, whittling a small branch down to a point. She found him there more than an hour later, chalk dust on her fingers and a faint flush to her cheeks. They listened, she said, sitting beside him on the dirt. Even the little ones, I heard. They liked the story about the fox and the grapes, said it reminded them of someone down the road who's always complaining. Rhett chuckled softly. Sounds like they took to you quick. She picked up a pebble and turned it over in her palm. I forgot what it felt like to be useful. You've always been useful, just didn't have the right place to show it. She looked at him. I don't know what you think of me, Rhett. I came here a mess. I didn't think anything, he said. I saw what you were carrying. And I figured you'd set it down when you were ready. She turned toward him fully, the distance between them narrowed by wind and heat and time. I'm not the same woman who ran through the trees that night. I know. I want to build something now, not just run from things. Rhett met her eyes. Then build it here. With me, her breath caught. You mean that? I do. They sat in silence, the kind that doesn't press or expect. When she reached for his hand, he met her halfway. His fingers were rough, his grip steady. I can cook, she said, a little too quickly. Well enough, anyway. And I sew a straight seam. I've seen your stitching. It's straighter than any line I ever rode. She laughed, surprised by the sound of it. He shifted closer. We could build a second room, off the back. For when you want quiet. And when I don't, then you'll find me close. The breeze lifted the edge of her skirt. She didn't move to fix it. I never thought I'd feel safe enough to choose someone, she said. But I choose you, Rhett. If you'll have me, I already do. There was nothing hurried in the way he kissed her, nothing claimed, just a promise made in the hush between morning and noon. When they rode home later, the sun high and warm at their backs, they did so not as strangers bound by rescue or debt, but as two people who had found one another in the wreckage and chosen to stay. By late August, Helena had settled into the rhythm of her new life like a hand sliding into a well-worn glove. Mornings began before the sun cleared the ridge Rhett, splitting kindling out by the lean-to, while she boiled water for coffee, her hands steady even in the half-light. The days rolled by, marked by the quiet repetition of work and the comfort of knowing where they'd end up each night. Side by side, the warmth between them no longer tentative or new but earned. One afternoon, Rhett returned from the canyon trail with a folded note in his pocket and a leaden expression. Helena was outside, stringing up laundry behind the cabin, her straw hat tilted low to shield against the glare. She straightened when she saw him. "What's happened?" He passed her the paper. The handwriting was rough, the ink smudged from sweat. She read it once, then again, slower. "Pike's been seen asking around at the freight station in White Gulch," Rhett said, hooking his thumbs into his belt. "That's only 2 days' ride from here." Helena folded the note, her fingers pale at the knuckles. "Who sent this?" Jude Atlee. "Used to ride with me during the cattle run 3 years back. He's working stock near there now. Said Pike was offering coin for information. Didn't name you exactly. But he described you." Her pulse thudded in her throat. "He won't give up easy." "No," Rhett said. "He won't." She looked toward the hills, the air around her suddenly too still. "So what do? We stay smart. I don't want you walking to the chapel alone for a while. And I'll sleep closer to the barn, just in case." She shook her head. "I won't let him drive us underground. I won't live like that again. I ain't asking you to hide. I'm asking you to let me look out for you." She met his gaze. "I'll agree to caution, but not fear." He nodded once. "That's fair." Later that evening, she found him sitting on the porch steps, sharpening the blade of an old scythe. She sat beside him, her knees drawn up beneath her skirt. "Was he always like that?" Rhett asked, not looking up. "Pike," her voice was quiet. "No, at first he was. Polite. He brought flowers, spoke poetry he didn't write. He fooled my father good." "And when did you start to see through it?" She traced a finger along the wood grain of the step. "Not until it was too late. He'd change in small ways. A hand too tight on my arm. A word meant to embarrass, but said with a smile. It's hard to name something when it doesn't leave bruises at first." Rhett set down the whetstone. "You can name it now." "I can," she said. "And I have." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that acknowledged pain without demanding it be spoken aloud again. Then she said, "You ever been in love before?" He leaned back on his palms. "Once. A long time back. She married a banker in Butt. I reckon she made the right choice. He had more to offer." "I don't believe that. Not for a second." He turned toward her. "I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like until you." She reached for his hand without hesitation. "This isn't something I ever imagined, Rhett. I didn't think peace was something people like me got. You've got it now, and you'll keep it if I've got anything to say about it." Her grip tightened around his fingers. If he finds his way here, you won't face him alone." "I know," Rhett said. "But he'll have to get through me first." She leaned her head against his shoulder, their joined hands resting between them. The sun dropped low, turning the sky to copper and violet, and the wind carried the scent of sage and dry pine. Inside, the lamplight waited. A room they had built together, not with hammers or nails, but with every steady choice, every quiet promise never spoken aloud. Helena closed her eyes, her breath even against his shirt. "We'll be ready," she said. Rhett pressed his lips to her hair. "We already are." By the first week of September, the heat had begun to ease, and a brittle edge crept into the mornings. Helena woke early. The window above the bed cracked open to let in the scent of drying grass and smoke from someone's chimney down valley. Rhett's side of the bed was already empty, but his shirt hung over the chair and the coffee pot sat warm on the stove. Signs he hadn't gone far. She pulled on her boots and stepped outside, wrapping her shawl tight around her shoulders. Rhett stood near the corral, hammer in hand, driving in a new fence post with slow, deliberate swings. His shirt clung to his back in the cool damp, and steam rose from the horses as they shifted in the pen behind him. "You didn't sleep long," she said, walking toward him. He paused, resting the hammerhead against the post. "Didn't feel like wasting the light. I thought maybe you were keeping watch." "I was." He didn't say more, but she could read the rest in the tightness of his jaw and the way his eyes flicked toward the woods with every shift in the wind. She touched his arm. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what happens if Pike does find this place." His eyes met hers, wary but open. "I won't run again." Her hand stayed firm on his sleeve. "But I also won't let him decide what kind of life we get to have. I want to file a petition official with the circuit court for annulment, so there's no question left of who I belong to. You don't need anyone's paper to tell you that." "No," she said quietly, "but I want it anyway. It's not just about leaving him. It's about choosing you." He didn't answer right away, just looked at her like he was memorizing the way her hair caught the morning light. Then he nodded, once. "I'll ride with you when you're ready." That afternoon, they saddled the mare and Rhett's gelding and rode south to the county clerk's station, a lean, sun-faded structure with a warped porch and a single desk inside. The clerk, a man in his 60s with ink-stained fingers and a receding hairline, listened without comment as Helena gave her name and explained her business. She signed the page with her full hand, steady and sure. When it was done, they stepped back out into the sunlit yard. Rhett leaned against the rail while she tucked the signed document into her satchel. "You sure you're at peace with it?" he asked. She glanced sideways at him. "I'm not carrying it anymore." "That's peace enough." They stayed in town long enough to buy flour, lamp oil, and a bolt of muslin, then rode back through the canyon trail just as the sun began to touch the western hills. That night, as they sat in the cabin, Helena pulled a folded piece of cloth from the shelf above the hearth. "I started this before I left home," she said, laying it flat on the table. "Didn't know what I was making it for then. It was a quilt square, half-finished, stitched in deep blues and rust reds." She ran her fingers along the edge. "I want to finish it now," she said. "With pieces from this place. bits of our life here." Rhett looked at it for a long moment, then back at her. "Then let's make it together." For the next week, they added to it in the evening scraps from a worn work shirt, the corner of a flour sack printed with the name of the mill, a bit of the shawl Helena had worn that first day she taught at the chapel. Every piece laid down with care. On the 10th day of work, as the light faded and the sound of crickets filled the quiet space between them, Rhett set down his needle and reached into the drawer beneath the table. He pulled out a small, carved box and set it in front of her. "I was waiting for the right time," he said. Helena opened it. Inside, nestled in a fold of linen, was a simple gold ring, thin, unpolished, but shaped by hand. She looked up, eyes wide. "I know you're not a woman to be claimed," he said, "but I'd be proud to stand beside you always if you'll have me." She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She rose, came to him, and wrapped her arms around his waist, her face pressed to his chest. "I already do," she whispered. They married under the cottonwoods by the creek, with the deacon from the canyon chapel reading from a worn psalter and Letty holding a bouquet of wild asters in her small hands. The children sang a hymn in wavering voices, and the wind carried their laughter out across the meadow. Afterward, they returned to the cabin not as fugitives or survivors, but as husband and wife. That night, Helena lit the lamp and set it on the windowsill, casting a soft glow across the yard. Rhett came up behind her, arms sliding around her waist. "No more watching for shadows," she said. "No," he murmured. "Only sunrises now." They lay down together in the bed they'd built with their own hands beneath a roof held up by trust and time. Outside, the world spun on, indifferent, but inside those walls there was warmth and quiet and love without condition. In the years that followed, Helena taught every child that came down the ridge trail how to read and write their names. Rhett built a second corral, then a smokehouse, then a cradle carved from pine when the time came. Sterling Pike never returned. Word reached them months later that he had been arrested in Cheyenne after a saloon brawl turned deadly. He was sentenced, then forgotten, his name never spoken in Helena's home again. They grew old with the land, not untouched by hardship, but unbroken by it. The quilt grew too, each piece a chapter, each stitch a promise that they had made something lasting from the brittle edges of their pasts. And every night, when the fire burned low and the wind rustled through the cottonwoods, Helena reached across the bed and found Rhett's hand waiting for her, steady, warm, and always there.